is Keys to the Shop, episode 416, Keys to Growing Your Business with Mike McFall of Biggby Coffee. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I am your host for the show, and I am thankful for you joining me today, listening to Keys to the Shop. And please, I would ask you to subscribe to the show. Put out a lot of episodes, and I would hate for you to miss any of them. If you subscribe, you'll always be updated with new content as it comes out. That also helps the show a lot, as well as sharing these episodes with your friends and with your team. And on social media, let people know Keys to the Shop is a podcast, offers a ton of resources through these conversations with industry leaders and deep dives into topics that are relevant to the coffee shop business and to coffee professionals around the world. So thank you everybody for doing that. And also, if you love what Keys to the Shop does, would you leave a 5-star rating or review over on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify? That would make a world of difference as well. Thank you so much. Now, Keys to the Shop is not just a podcast, but also offers consulting and coaching one-on-one for you to work through opportunities, challenges, problems in the business, work through opening your first coffee business. It's really important to have clarity and the right foundations for a thriving business. And that's why I love working through Keys to the Shop Consulting with entrepreneurs and operators who are seeking to build something long-lasting and dynamic. This can be one-on-one conversation, anywhere from just remote coaching and consultation calls to on-site assessments and evaluations of your business. There's a lot of ways you can work with Keys to the Shop Consulting, and I would love for you to contact me and let's have a conversation. We could set up a free discovery call, talk all about what you've got going on and how I can come alongside you and help you achieve great things through your coffee business. Go ahead and email chris@keystotheshop.com, and I'll look forward to hearing from you and seeing how Keys to the Shop Consulting can help you. Again, that email is chris@keystotheshop.com. How many times have you been in a coffee bar and really been excited to try what's on offer, but the product itself was just a little underwhelming? There's a whole host of reasons why this might be the case, and one of them might be that it just wasn't brewed properly, or the equipment was not exactly up to snuff when it came to opening up that coffee's full potential. And so as we raise our standards in the coffee industry, so too the technology has to become better and better. That's why I'm so excited about the Ground Control Cyclops brewer from Voga Coffee. The Ground Control uses SCA award-winning technology to unlock flavors and depth and range in your coffees that you previously didn't even know were there, or didn't have access to. It really levels up the game for batch brew coffee, but also the technology allows you to make batch iced lattes, batch cold brew, even tea. So there's a lot of avenues that this can open up for you to increase your profitability as well as your efficiency and quality. So check them out at groundcontrol.coffee for more information. I really do think that this is the kind of thing that you need to seriously look into if you want to level up what your customers experience from your quality coffee. You should look into getting a Ground Control Cyclops brewer for your store. Again, check them out over at groundcontrol.coffee. The beautiful thing about coffee is that it's a daily ritual, and every day we have an opportunity to express ourselves through the way that we produce each and every cup of coffee. Ingredients are important, and working with a company that produces something consistent and tailored to your desire to produce beauty in every cup is also very important. And that's why if you want to serve the best plant-based beverages possible, you should be using the Barista series from Pacific. It's designed for baristas tested by baristas before it even reaches your shelf. So it absolutely performs on bar to optimize flavor, texture, and just create beauty in every cup. And so I would encourage you to go to pacificfoodservice.com to learn more and get samples in your store, to try their product for yourself. I think you're really going to be impressed. If you're looking for the best plant-based beverages to serve your customers, I think it needs to be the Barista series from Pacific. All right, everybody. Well, I'm really excited to welcome back to the show Mike McFall, who is the co-founder and co-CEO of Biggby Coffee. Biggby Coffee is a fast-growing coffee franchise with over 350 locations across the United States. Within the company, Mike has worked every position from minimum wage barista to his current role of co-CEO. On top of this, he is the author of the book Grind, a no BS approach to take your business from concept to cash flow, and the most recent book that is launched on the 6th this month in June, Grow, Take Your Business from Chaos to Calm. And it was such a great conversation we had with Mike on the show previously. You can find that episode in the show notes here. But today we're going to be talking with Mike about his new book, Grow, and exploring some of the key concepts in it that is going to help you grow your business in the right ways. We're going to talk about trust and cultivating trust, what goes into that, emotional stability. We'll talk about what it looks like to embrace unbridled truth in the workplace, as well as concepts of time management and some tools like the rule of 5 and more that will help you actually put these things into practice. And so, of course, we deep dive into these subjects throughout this conversation. I think you're going to pull a lot from today's interview that you can apply to your business pretty quickly. And of course, you should explore the book fully afterwards as well. And so I'm really excited to share this with you. Let's get right to it. Here now is my interview on growing your business with Mike McFall. Well, Mike, welcome back to Keys to the Shop. How are you today?
Wonderful, Chris. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. And, you are just producing these great books. It's exciting to see you taking your experience with the business and putting it into a context that other people can access. And so that's, obviously what podcasts like to do, and that you're being generous with your information, helping so many people is really awesome. So talk to me a little bit about, the book right now is obviously doing well, called Grow. How is it different than the previous book, Grind?
It's the second book in a 3-book series. So Grind was the first book, and it was really about the ethos of business startup and the mentality which I advocate for people who are in that phase, in the startup phase. Book 2, Grow, takes over once you've hit positive cash flow. You have a you're a bootstrapping entrepreneur, and Grow takes over in that moment and helps you with the transformation from, that maniacal, controlling archetype as an entrepreneur, and transitioning into the leader that your organization needs you to be, but then also carries you through the arc to what I call irrelevance as the entrepreneur, and then therefore sustainability for the business. The business is no longer dependent on you as the leader, as the entrepreneur, in order to thrive. So that's the arc that book 2 takes us on. But the first 2 books were really written to give me the street credibility to write book 3, which is, actually the book I'm really looking forward to writing, and that's really the conversation I want to be having in the world.
So street cred for the third was the first 2. That's pretty cool. And the irrelevancy of your position in the business is something that it's interesting to hear it put that way, because most people, and these are people I talk to as clients, and I'm sure people you talk to who are opening shops and reading the books, there's a desire to become irrelevant in the best possible way, but also a fear associated with doing so because it feels like you're losing control over your baby, over what you want some legacy in your life. You want to know you're proud of what you're doing. talk to us a little bit about, how we should define irrelevancy as we continue our conversation here.
Well, I think probably the biggest challenge that entrepreneurs face in that transition from entrepreneur to leader to irrelevant is the understanding that the team and the leadership group that you've put together is going to be better at running the
Thank
business
you so much for
than you
listening
are.
to the show. Don't forget to
And once we
subscribe,
make that
rate and review Keys
transition
to the Shop.
emotionally,
Share these episodes
and
with a
that's the
friend,
big
a
part of it,
family
right?
member, with your
Once you
lawyer.
make the transition
And as
emotionally
always, I
to the
hope that
fact
this episode
that this
has
team of
truly
people is
given
better
you
at this than you ever would be.
keys
You get over
to
the
the shop.
controlling nature of the entrepreneurial phase where, you have every answer for every problem. Then the business really truly has the opportunity to become sustainable and to thrive when you're no longer involved.
I want to dive into these things very specifically today in this new book, but I'm interested to ask you this because we all have, depending on who's listening, we have maybe enough experience to have lessons that we can pull out from our own experience. I forget who said this, but it's like everyone has a book in them, so we could write something or we could teach something. At what point in this journey for you did the lessons you learned start to become really identifiable as to be able to be taught and, after teaching you, of course?
I mean, that's a great question. And, the book one, I felt pretty comfortable with writing that because of my experience in my day job, which is supporting people in developing their business using the Biggby Coffee franchise model. And so a franchise is an interesting beast because you have all kinds of different people, all kinds of different marketplaces taking the same model and executing it in different places. And so the interesting part of that is you begin to see personality traits and you begin to see what works for people and what doesn't work for people all executing the same system. And I felt very comfortable in writing book one, Grind, and having observed hundreds of different people enter our world. Some make it very, very successful and some it doesn't work for. And so what were some of the underlying currents and traits of the people that made it successful? And that's really what I tried to write about. So I felt real comfortable about book one. Book two, my business partner, I wouldn't say that we're fully completed with the transition to irrelevance. I would say we're 85 to 90% there. And so, maybe I have a little less confidence in writing that book because I haven't pulled that phase off yet completely, but I feel like I've gone through enough of it and learned enough to be able to write on it and bring value to people who are maybe at the very beginning stages of that transition. And, even the people in the later stages, we've been through enough. We've been at it 27 years and, we're assembling that group. But still to some degree a work in progress. Book three is not, that one I don't know that I've got full confidence to write that one yet. I'm gonna go for it though, and we'll see. I'm gonna hopefully start writing that next year. But that's about legacy. That's about, okay, what do we do now?
Well, it seems like aspirational is a word that comes to mind when it comes to these things, where books have this way of saying, okay, there's a beginning and an end, and you've achieved or you've not achieved. You as the author are saying, yeah, you're still pursuing this. This is not necessarily something that you say, okay, well, I'm going to look behind me one day and I'm just going to be wiping my hands clean from now I am irrelevant and I can move on to something else. Or now I am, like for the book, like talking about building trust with your team. Like once I've achieved that, that's it. Happy day. But you have to keep working at it and getting better and better at it. So it's an always thing, but it's always in the right direction, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess what I might lay on top of that is that I think today, right now, if my partner and I were to, get run over by the same bus one afternoon, I think the business would continue to thrive. I do believe that. I think we've got a strong enough team in place, good enough leadership that I don't worry about that. I'm not interested in being done yet. And so a big part of that moment of sustainability is having a whole complex set of options in front of me as the entrepreneur. And then I get to choose which path I want to go down. That might be selling. That might be bringing in a strategic partner. That might be private equity. That might be passing this off to a foundation. For some people, it might be passing it off to their kids. So having a lot of different options at this stage of my career and the development of my business is really what I'm going for. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I do believe, though, if I were to pass, the business would continue to thrive.
Awesome. Yeah. And that's a great place to be. It's a good kind of freedom. So let's talk a little bit about some of the themes in the book that will help us get there where we are in our own businesses, like trust, as I mentioned just a second ago. That's obviously a through line for a lot of what we need in coffee shops or in just working environments. How do we foster trust in the coffee shop amongst this ever kind of ebbing and flowing body of people that are all kind of there for the same reasons, but have various needs and approaches? What does fostering trust look like?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to realize as leaders, no matter what organization we're involved in, is that we have to earn the right to lead people. And that's a transition in thinking, I think, for some. And people don't just, based on the fact that you're their manager or you're their employer, they don't automatically grant you the ability to lead them. You have to earn that. And you earn that through integrity. You earn that through living up to, doing what you say you're going to do, being a person that is dependable, being a person that's dedicated to the business. And so at the end of the day, you have to earn the right to lead first. And a big part of that is the individual trusting in you, and you begin to build trust, and then that gives you the ability to lead. It's a little bit of a circular argument, but I think it starts with you as the leader, understanding that you have to earn their trust.
I like the term earn, and maybe matched up with the word being. You have to be this, or there's a practice involved. It's not just a statement of character that you tell people, hey, I'm trustworthy, or I have
Right.
integrity. So you best believe that. And if you don't, then, it's your problem. But the earning is the action. It seems that we have to take all the time to basically kind of prove what we may think about ourselves, or maybe we already know that we're not trustworthy and we need to work on that. What kind of obstacles do we personally have to overcome where it's not going to be this issue of, let me see how quickly I can burn through all, jump through all the hoops, if you will, to gain trust and then be done with it? Or, you know what I mean? Like, make it other people's problem.
Well, I think what I coach people on who are starting businesses, something like this. If you aren't planning on being the most dedicated and dependable person in your business for 5 to 7 to 10 years, don't get started. You have to be the most dependable. And that is an absolutely key ingredient to building trust and having integrity with your people. I remember getting into it with my 17-year-old, where I had a call I had to be on, and I was working from home that day. And, he said something flippant like, well, I mean, you're the boss, Dad. Like, really? Like, you gotta shut down whatever we were up to so you can go get on a call. Like, and I'm like, well, but being the boss means it's even more important that I'm there on time, prepared, ready. And I can't show up 7 minutes late, not prepared for the meeting, because then I'm not acting with an integrity. And so in terms of what I've committed. And so it is about being the leader, is about showing up, being dedicated, being dependable, being a person of integrity. And then that is how you end up building trust within the organization, within the team.
What do you think about people who weaponize their own good performance against those who don't demonstrate the same thing?
This is an interesting question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Let me
Can you give
explain
me a
it a
little
little bit
more?
more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it basically, if I'm going to play the part of somebody who says, hey, I'm here 24/7. I'm working so many hours. I am trustworthy, et cetera. But these people, this generation, fill in the blank, they're not. And so I have to swoop in and I do all these things. I have integrity. So it becomes sort of like I am executing on the things maybe that you were saying, but I'm also seeing it as a reason to sort of denigrate those around me who are not also doing the same thing.
Well, there's some assumption in that workaholism is necessary, and that by being dedicated where you are working 12-hour days, 60 hours a week, that you are more effective than somebody who isn't. And so, I hear it same as you do. You hear this phrase, kids today don't have a work ethic. They're not interested in, committing to so on and so forth. There's nothing wrong with people, and leaders need to understand that you don't motivate and inspire people by expecting them to work 60 hours a week. And real leadership is about putting a team together, allowing for people to be themselves, allowing for people to work have a reasonable relationship and existence with their work, and be productive and contribute. And so if your expectation is 60, 70, 80 hours a week, you're on a fool's errand. It's just not how it works in the world. And so they'll tell you it is. They'll tell you, I made it because I worked 80 hours a week. To me, that's hogwash. And it's kind of embarrassing, frankly, in my opinion. So what you're saying, I would much rather be able to say, hey, I built a coffee shop chain with 350 units, growing at 25% in my 27th year. And I don't even work 40 hours a week. And I've never averaged over 40 hours a week in my career in 27 years. Isn't that something to be proud of? Shouldn't I be prouder of that than somebody who's like, I neglected my family, but boy, I saw it through and I worked 80 hours a week and I ended up with this successful business. Like if I have to be a workaholic to have a successful business on my hands, I don't want the business.
Yeah, well said. I mean, it's a plea for validation of bad decisions.
Yeah, but we don't talk about that in the world. We hold the entrepreneur who works 80 hours up a week as a hero, and that's sad to me.
Mm. Well, that kind of ties into something else that I was interested in talking about, which is the idea of emotional stability as a cornerstone of what it would take to actually make something that's going to be sustainable, that's dependable, consistent. But, we're emotional people and we invent, stories in our heads that match up with what we're feeling. And often it's really difficult for us to manage our emotions. But what is it like to pursue, how do we pursue emotional stability and provide the same kind of a platform for others to have emotional stability in a highly emotional environment?
Well, it starts with understanding and regulating your own presence in the world. We know when it's happening, I think. We call it the cortisol bath internally here in our company, where you'll have this wave of cortisol that soaks your brain, and you get to this really negative space. And I don't think it takes a lot of awareness to know that that's happening in the moment. It's what do you do with it once you've become aware of it? And I liken a cortisol bath or negativity to essentially having body odor.
Oh,
Body odor is going to happen. It's going to happen. It's
yeah.
like, but once you're aware of it, okay, so what do? Well, you go take a shower, you put deodorant on, or maybe you try to avoid small meeting rooms for the rest of the day or whatever. You have a course of action when you realize you have body odor. Well, we should have that same, I call it the positivity shower. So when you have this negative moment, when you get very, very emotional, have the cortisol bath flow over your brain, what do you do? And so in my book, I advocate three things. I advocate one, that you take 24 hours, Don't behave, don't act, don't do anything. Take 24 hours. That's the simplest one. Of course, everybody knows that one. Have some kind of an activity that puts your brain into the right space. For me, it happens to be golf. So I'll go out, I'll grab a couple of cold beers, throw them in a cooler, a cigar, jump on a golf cart. I'll go play 9 holes all by myself. By the end of that 9 holes, my brain's probably in a pretty good spot. The final one, that's probably the one that no one's heard of. Those two things are quite simple. The final one that people probably haven't heard of is called, it's water in, water on, water out. And so it is, you're probably dehydrated, one, so drink a whole bunch of water, exercise, so sweat, and then 3, take a long shower. You do those 3 things, at the end of that, you're probably going to be okay. Right? You've probably regulated yourself to a place where you're not going to make some significant mistake based on your emotional state. So, but the key is becoming aware when that's occurring and knowing when you need to plug in some kind of a filter or activity to help regulate.
And if you're demonstrating this as a leader, and maybe, I don't know, tell me if this is helpful to tell people almost that you're doing that. Like my boy is 9 years old, and emotional regulation is still a subject, of course. So I have to maybe demonstrate that, which is difficult at times to do, like talking about like what I'm feeling, or maybe even articulating, well, I'm not going to think about that right now because I'm not really going to make a great decision. And I may be doing that as a display for somebody else to kind of pick up on, like you would hint like something you want your significant other to buy you, for your birthday. Does that work? Is that something we can do to help other people kind of mimic or do the same thing?
I think so. I have this series of power statements on my website. They're just sort of interesting statements that maybe people in the world haven't heard before. And one of them is, take naps and tell your people about it. So right there, for me, I know, and that's not for everybody. Like my mom can't take naps. She hates it. She wakes up grumpy and whatever. But for me anyway, I take naps and I wake up and I feel better. I feel like I've taken a Valium, right? All my stuff's gone. And so, but for me, that really works. And so like, I don't hide the fact that I take a nap. I don't hide the fact that I'm going to get up and go for a 40-minute walk in the middle of the afternoon. Like, we need that. Like, you can't show up at work at 7:30 in the morning and grind hard for, 8, 9 straight hours and then go home and like feel like you're productive that whole time. You're not. You're just not. And the other thing that I talk about in my book is, I've never come up with a good idea sitting in front of a computer, working on an email or inside of a spreadsheet ever in my life. Where I come up with good ideas is on the ski hill, sitting at the bottom of the ski hill, having a drink with my brother, on the golf course by myself, smoking a cigar. That's where I have good ideas. And I tell people all the time. So do I believe that I need my people grinding away, quote, where you can see the whites of their eyes? That is such an archaic mentality around leadership and management.
The idea of giving your all might be antithetical to giving your best.
There you go. I like that.
Just the idea that if my people are not doing all the stuff and like time to lean, time to clean. Now I get it. There is some of that you do have to keep people accountable for the core tasks that are actually part of the work. But at the same time, people are still people. And sometimes we forget that, even about ourselves. I mean, it's where a lot of burnout comes. We think of ourselves like an espresso machine or a computer, and instead of just this entity that needs things in order to function well.
Well, I think too, I don't want anybody to think that I haven't had moments, and fairly long moments, where I had to work super hard. I mean, I have, but what I advocate is if you're running your engine at 6,300 RPMs every day for 6 straight months or a year straight, you don't have anything left to give if your company needs it from you, or if your people need it from you. You're maxed. You're redlining, right? So if I'm running at 3,500 RPMs and all of a sudden something happens and my people need me, or my organization needs something significant from me, I have the bandwidth to engage and do it. And I think that's important as a leader is you need to know when it really is important that you step into something aggressively, take the lead, work hard, and put something together that's meaningful for the organization at that moment in time.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really good advice. And, you know, in the bid to regulate our emotional environment, oftentimes we want to protect ourselves also, and we become purveyors of, wearing different masks, right? So we'll come in and we will, as a manager especially, this is true. We don't want drama. We don't want to have to deal with X, Y, and Z. And so we just pretend it doesn't exist, or we don't deal with the problems right away. We hope they'll go away on their own. And sometimes that's masked by saying, like, I trust my people and they'll work it out and that kind of thing. But in the book, you talk about the principle of unbridled truth. And that feels like an invitation to have to manage your emotions even more, because if you're, face to face with something that's true, but inconveniently true, it's, easily something I could subconsciously avoid. So I guess the question is, what does it look like to pursue and practice unbridled truth in the various spheres of influence that we have in the business?
I think truth and integrity go together. And people know when we're acting outside of integrity by not telling the truth. And then we're doing damage to the relationship. So that's why leadership is hard. That's why leadership is exhausting, is that you still have to have that hard conversation even when you don't want to, in order to provide the person that's within your care the feedback they need to grow as a person, as an employee, and so on. And so that's the burden of leadership. And in my opinion, that's what makes leadership exhausting and tiring, and is that you can't, I mean, I don't want to, I sit here and I make it sound like it's so definitive, like we all have conversations that aren't perfectly truthful every day, right? We do. But I think it's really leaning in and trying hard to be as authentic and truthful as we can, and that we have energy for. And that's the value we bring as a leader to each person that's within our team, within our world.
There's something called rule of five. Is that related?
They're just great tools that we've applied over the years. There's 3 of them. I'm pulling these from memory right now, but there is the fist of 5, which is a decision-making mechanism, which is really incredible. Pulled from, I'm going to forget his name right now. Lencioni, I think. Oh gosh, if that's right, I'm pulling that from the archives. But the fist of 5 is anyone in a meeting can throw out a solution or a direction forward, and then you take a vote and you throw out a 1 to a 5. And a 1 is, I'm firmly against this. A 5 is I fully support it and I'm willing to take a leadership position. And then the 3 is I'm kind of indifferent. And then obviously 2 and 4 fall in between those. So the point though is that you throw out a solution or a direction forward, you throw the fist of 5, boom, at that moment you start to have a more definitive, real conversation about moving forward. Maybe everyone's a 3, 4, and a 5, and you just move forward, and there's no more discussion needed. So that's one of the rules of 5. The other one is the 5 levels of decision making, and that is the 5 is it's going to be the team's going to make the decision with no involvement from the leader. A 4 is the team's going to make a decision and the leader is going to give input. 3 is consensus. 2 is the leader is going to make the decision with input from the team. And a 1 is that the leader is going to make the decision with no input from the team. And that last one sounds a little weird. Like, why would you ever want to make a decision and not involve your team? Oftentimes that's to provide cover for the team. Right? So if they weren't involved in the decision, they don't have to take heat around the decision that was made, and you can be the bad guy as the leader. And so that's the 5 levels of decision making. The third and final one is 5 whys. So when you're in the midst of a discussion where there's disagreement, ask why 5 times in a row. And at the end of 5 whys, you'll be at the root of the issue.
That's great. So it's a combination of this leadership that is using the pursuit of getting to the core issue, or maybe that's truth of how we feel about something, so that we can give our true input on a project. If I'm involved in shaping some system for the shop, I might withhold if I don't, trust my leader, or if I am not given the opportunity to show up authentically and voice my opinion. Then we're not really pursuing unbridled truth. We're just accepting our own opinion and not really being curious about other people's opinions. And so as a course of all these decisions you have to make, it feels like maybe allowing people to be vulnerable about their opinions in a safe place is part of the pursuit of getting down to the core issues, or the unbridled truth, if you will.
There's a lot of ways to have discussion and conversation around disagreement. The tools that I just talked about, the 5, the power of 5, these 3 different tools, they're just tools to help facilitate a healthy engagement discussion around disagreement. And oftentimes it's not even disagreement. It's just, trying to get on the same page in relation to something or whatever. So I found those to be really effective tools. We use them constantly in our world, and they really work.
Awesome. And when I am looking at all of the things that I need to do as a leader and the things that people depend on me for, a lot of the things we've actually just talked about, the subject of time comes up because, well, maybe it doesn't come up enough, because we do say, I love these things. This is a great idea. Okay. I'm all for it. But then we just walk out the door and we don't make time for anything. And we maybe don't schedule ourselves and for things that we know we need to follow through on, which, impacts everything, the trust, integrity, et cetera. So time management is more than just like this thing where, people write a lot of books about it. There's podcasts about time management. How does time management relate to being able to create something that truly is thriving, I'd say, without you, in a way that other people feel a sense of like it's not out of control, it's not chaotic, but you're using time management in the appropriate way to hold yourself and other people responsible for a great outcome?
I think that I'm not going to say number one. One of the top 3 contributing factors for me to be able to get my business to where it is, and for my career to be where it is a maniacal obsession with my time. And it is something that I have constantly worked on and gotten better at. And I have all kinds of tips that I put into the book, because if there's one thing that I can say that I'm pretty darn good at in the world, is being productive and managing my time. And I hear from people all the time. In fact, my mom said it to me the other day. She's like, how do you get all this done? It's amazing, Mike. Like, you have 4 kids. You're an active father. You've got this crazy business that's growing like crazy. You're launching book, on and on, right? And the answer to that question is, I am maniacal with my time. Don't waste my time. It is the only thing that I have. It's the only thing that I control. And so I am obsessive over, if a meeting can last 8 minutes, let's make it last 8 minutes. I say to people all the time, what is said in 30 could be said in 20, should be said in 7 words. It's just something that, and like I break my hours up into 20-minute increments. So I wake up in the morning and let's say I've got 2 hours ahead of me. I'll break it up into 6 working sessions inside of 2 hours. And I will sit and I'll have 3 major projects, and I'll rotate through those 3 major projects over 2 hours. I get up, I feel great because I moved all 3 projects forward in some kind of meaningful way. I spent 40 minutes on each one. So this stuff I get pretty intense around, because when I commit to work, when I commit to being here, when I commit to doing it, I want to be as effective as I can possibly be in the time I'm here. So you know what? I'm going to walk out of this office today at 4:55 so I can be home on time, and that's it. And that's the time I've got. So I'm going to be as productive as I can possibly be.
You're prioritizing your time based on what your best and highest contribution is in that moment to the business. How does that work if I was to do that myself let's say I'm an owner of a coffee shop? Is that just one day per week I set to schedule myself a certain number of hours on certain things based on that prioritization?
Well, I believe if you can hire somebody to do a job for you and pay them $15 an hour, hire that person to do that for $15 an hour because your time is worth way more than $15 an hour, in my opinion. And so, I've always lived by that, which is, if I hire people to do just about everything for me so that I can spend time, and it's been this way for a long time. I'm not just saying that now that I've got a bigger company in my
Right.
hands and I can afford to hire people, but like I've always done that. I've always been that way. Like in my stores, like, I mean, I would hand over the writing the schedule immediately in a store to somebody that's been with the store for 4 days. Does that sound crazy? No, it's not hard to write a schedule, right? Like, it's not a complicated thing. Like, most people can figure out how to write a schedule or, "Hey, let's do the Cisco order and let me show you how to do it." And yeah, you've only been here for 3 weeks. That's okay. You can get real good at doing the Cisco order, I promise. It's not rocket science, right? But so, like, that's the kind of efficiency that I've always been obsessed with is why do I feel like I have to do the bank reconciliations? Why do I feel like I have to do the Cisco order as the manager of the business? I don't. What I wanted to do is I wanted to be out front at the machine, making drinks, engaging the customers, because that's where I knew I had extraordinary talent. And that was the best thing for me to be doing for the business, not sitting in
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
reconciling a bank
Well,
bag.
I mean, it might boil down to trust. Yeah. And saying, well, I don't trust them to do it the way I want it to be done. What would you say to people who do just hang on to a lot of those things where they really could delegate them? What do they do to get over that hump? And then they're fearful, and they've said as much to me in coaching conversations. Once let go of that, who am I? What do I do with my time?
Grow the business, grow the business. Like that's what you do with your time is you have to sit and have an engaged conversation with yourself that is what can I do in the next 30, 60, 90 days to most powerfully impact my business, to grow my business. And I teach a class here at the University of Michigan in entrepreneurship, and I had a really powerful engagement with a student this past semester. She came up to me and she said, "Why are entrepreneurs obsessed with growth?" And it took me, I didn't answer the question immediately. I came back the following week and I said, "It isn't about growth, it's about improving."
Hmm.
And the successful entrepreneurs I know just want to get better and better and better at what they do. Growth is a outcome of that. And so what do you need to do as the manager of the business, as the leader of the business? What's the most powerful thing you can do to improve the business? And focus on that. And I promise you, it's not writing a schedule or doing the Cisco order. Oh, and by the way, people make mistakes. You do too,
Right,
right? Like,
right.
it's okay, like, because you hand it off to somebody, they're not gonna be good at it for the first 5 times they do it. That's okay. They'll learn, and they'll grow, and they'll get better at it, and you know what? 2 months from now, they'll be pretty darn good at it.
Well, the idea of growth too, there are some people they might have very limited and purposefully so. They want to stick to one shop, two shops. David Schomer comes to mind, 35 years now, I think, something like that, but two shops. And
We got our start with David.
oh yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And godfather of espresso, in America at least, with popularizing. I mean, the man had a platform to create. It was a blank canvas. And so, you say, well, he didn't grow. So he's spending his time on growth. And somewhat, I guess so, because when you're talking about this, it's like, yes, we want to figure out what's your highest contribution, but also the business is not just going to naturally stay where it is. I feel like there's, you know, entropy happening here, right? It's always kind of devolving. So you're also maybe not just seeking a second location, you're just keeping the blood flowing in the first one.
Yeah, I've often wondered about that. And I don't know that I have any kind of wisdom around that because, you know, if we have one store and we were operating one store, we would have the same mentality of always trying to get better. And David Schomer did a lot with, temperatures and water temperatures and understanding so much about the science of coffee. And that was his, he's a technician. He's a brilliant one. He was very, very good at all of that. And so that was his contribution. And he got a lot of people into the business, and so he didn't necessarily benefit from, I think my partner took a class from him back in the day. And so, I guess he benefited because my partner paid for the class, but I don't think that was ever what it was about for David Schomer, right? I mean, he was just really into getting better and better and better at making a coffee. And, I would guess that the business for him is also a mechanism to support him and other passions too, which all businesses should be to some degree for the entrepreneur is a way to be engaged in the world and pursue other things, and so I'm not giving a very articulate answer because it's a very curious question for me, which is if I wanted to have one store and just really run an amazing store, like that's challenging in and of itself, and there's a lot to that, there's a lot of self searching going on in relation to how you would do that and how you would make it a better store and show up to work every day to bring new energy and take care of the customers. I think for me, a lot of it would be that customer relationship. That would drive me. I would be really passionate about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly something to be said for both situations, having a keen sense of curiosity where I guess I'm never assuming that I know everything about that thing, even if it's just one shop. I'm like, if I've mastered that shop, it's doubtful. I don't know if you have because, life changes, people change, you get different customers, staff, and you're different. I'm different after decades of work, right? So I guess there's always curiosity. And one of the things that we need to be is a constant learner, as you say in the book here. And that will set us on the right course to discover things about what we need to do. So practically speaking, what is it that we need to do to actually become constant learners and build a company that is kind of filled with that kind of person?
Well, someone who's a constant learner is somebody who's obsessed with improving. So how do you create that culture? I mean, I think that we do that as leaders. We demonstrate that. I'm always talking about books that I'm reading, and I'm always asking people what they're reading. I think there's just sort of some natural curiosity that goes with being a constant learner. But trying to get to the root of your question here, it's as leaders, we have to demonstrate. And, I think the other thing too is as a leader, you have to provide people the opportunity and time. If you're going to work somebody 50 hours a week and then expect them to do self-development work and
Right.
reading, like that's not fair, right? We used to do reading hours on Tuesdays and Thursday afternoons where I think they were 90 minutes where we would just say, listen, we're going to take 90 minutes and we want you to read. Whatever book you're in the middle of, we want you to read. And so it was 3 hours a week that we would carve out and make available. That lasted for probably, 5 years or so. And somehow it ended up going away. I think people decided that they didn't want to do it on Tuesdays and Thursdays, that we would just make it so that you had 3 hours a week to read. But then once we took away the structure around it, I don't think anybody did it anymore,
Oh, okay.
Meaning they wouldn't put a sign up on their door saying, "Hey, it's my reading hour this
Okay.
week."
Well, that's interesting. So, but you took the initiative to say this is important to us as a company, and we're going to take the first step and say, here's a platform, here's an institution in our business that will provide you with what we believe is valuable, and people took to it in those 5
Yeah.
years.
Well, and we would have reading assignments for our leadership team. So we would be reading books. We would say, this book we're going to read from, we're going to read chapters 3 and 4 by Thursday. And the expectation was you would show up and you would have found the time in your work day to read those 2 chapters. Not reading them at night after the kids go to bed or whatever. It was, you were expected to make the time and so that's pretty progressive stuff. And like, I don't find it progressive at all, but like if you talk to traditional managers, it's like, what? Like you're gonna let people like close their door and like kick their feet up and read for an hour? It's like, well, yeah, isn't that how people learn? And don't we want our people learning?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's their golf and cigar moment, isn't it?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Well, when people dive into this book, obviously there's a lot more to experience in the book in terms of practical examples of the things that you've talked about here, plus, tools and steps to take. So as we wrap up here, I want to just know from you, what is it that you want people to get the most from this book? Like if you could say this book was a success because everyone keeps writing me and saying, hey, here's what I got from it. And it just makes Mike McFall's heart happy to hear it.
What a cool way to phrase that question. Yeah, I think if I could find out that people took on the challenge of building environments where they were nurturing and supportive environments, loving environments, and they took that on, and if I could someday have someone call me and say, holy smokes, did the traditional business metrics of my company skyrocket when we put these practices in place about being loving and supportive and nurturing. That's the premise of my book, which is that you do not sacrifice the quote financial performance of your company because you're building a loving and supportive and nurturing environment. It's actually the exact opposite. When you build a loving and supportive and nurturing environment that unlocks people's superpowers, that's when you have extraordinary financial performance of your company. And my company is living proof of that. But I need to prove this out way more aggressively than one small coffee shop chain based in Lansing, Michigan, right? And so that would be the like moment where I would feel like I'm having the impact in the world that I want to have, because I believe workplaces should be loving and supportive and nurturing so that people go home from work more invigorated than when they showed up.
That's awesome. Well, it sounds like you're well on your way to that with this book. I'm grateful that we got the chance to talk again and explore that.
This is nice. This is the second one of these that I've done an additional, like the next round, and it's more comfortable. I like it. Yeah, it's been nice, man. You're good at this. You do a nice job.
Oh, thank you. Well, you've got book 3 coming up, so I think we'll
get
just
a third lap.
That's right. We'll have to make 3. Third's a charm. So
I'd love it.
Yeah. Well, where can we go right now to learn more about the book, buy it, and explore your work?
Well, michaeljmcfall.com. So there's no punctuation there. It's just michaeljmcfall.com. And that's a website I put together. We launched it with the book last Tuesday. And so it talks a lot about my story, the different projects I'm involved in, but also, of course, there's links to where you can go ahead and buy the book, like on Amazon and stuff.
Wonderful. Mike, a pleasure as always. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, if there's one thing that you could say about this whole approach to growth in your business and Mike's way of communication, it is a people-first way of creating growth that not only produces a solid system that people can depend on, but produces that environment of trust, of stability, which in turn creates longevity and sustainability for your business. And these are the things that we want, but it has to be cultivated. It has to be, of course, grown. And that's why I'm so excited to have had this opportunity to welcome Mike back to the show. So a huge thank you to Mike McFall for joining us once again on Keys to the Shop. If you want to learn more about these books and all that Mike has produced, go to michaeljmcfall.com. And you could also find these books, Grind and Grow, on Amazon as well. I'll have links in the show notes for all of this. Of course, that includes the previous conversation that we had with Mike on Keys to the Shop. So if you have any questions, comments, or feedback for me about today's episode or any episode of Keys to the Shop, go ahead and send that to chris@keystotheshop.com. That's CHRIS@keystotheshop.com. And if you want one-on-one coaching and consultation for your business, and you want to work with Keys to the Shop in that process, go ahead and email that same address, chris@keystotheshop.com. And as soon as one trade show is done, another one is coming back up. I'm so excited for another Coffee Fest, 2 more this year, coming in August and then November. We're talking about Anaheim, California, and Orlando, Florida. Coffee Fest trade shows have been going on for 30 years now. It is, I think, one of the best, if not the best, resource for coffee retailers to learn how to build and run a great coffee shop. And it's not just the trade show with the accessibility to vendors of great products for the success of your business, but it's also the free or accessibly priced trainings, workshops, lectures, and panel discussions that further your education and energize your teams and equip you for success. I get to present at each of these shows, as well as head judge for the latte art competition. So I really want to see you there. Check out coffeefest.com and then use the code KEYS, KEYS, to get 50% off general admission for Coffee Fest. So use the code KEYS to get 50% off general admission, and go to coffeefest.com to do that. And do say hello. I always like meeting listeners to the show. I am also going to be having a booth at the show, so that will be an easy place to spot me. But yeah, anyway, I really hope to see you in Anaheim or in Orlando. Check it out at coffeefest.com. And with that, that is the end of our show today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and review Keys to the Shop. Share these episodes with a friend, a family member, with your lawyer. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.